Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today's solo episode is about GHK-Cu, which if you've been listening to me for a long time, following me, or kind of in the know in the peptide world, you know that this little copper peptide is a pretty magical compound, and I've been fascinated with it forever. And so as a result, I've been wanting to do a solo episode on it forever. I've, recorded a couple of podcasts with a company that makes a beautiful skincare line that uses this copper peptide as its central molecule or active ingredient, if you will. But, GHK copper is actually so much more than that. And so I just wanted to share with you guys some of the amazing things that have been found in research around GHK copper. Now, what's interesting about I'm not going to say what's interesting because everything's interesting about this peptide, but let's just say that GHK copper is endemic to our body. So we naturally have GHK copper in our system. It exists in our plasma, in our urine, and in our saliva. We have a lot more of it when we're young than when we're older, which is really interesting because if I had to describe a central role that this peptide plays in the body, it is that of repair and regeneration. And so, it's interesting if you think of your 20-year-old self, if you would cut yourself or you would get injured or something gets damaged, you think of it as, oh, like I used to heal really well when I was 20. And now when you're 40 or 50 or 60 or maybe beyond, we know that we don't heal as quickly. We just don't heal as well or as quickly. And when you've got a compound like GHK copper that is present in levels of 200 nanograms per milliliter in your 20s and then plummets to 80 nanograms per milliliter in your 60s, we see this delta. And if once we talk about all of the different things that this peptide can do, we can start to understand how this decline can actually start to contribute to the loss of what we see of these properties that it's able to do. Now, the second thing I want to talk to you about, to say to you, is in addition to being endemic to the body, in addition to levels being super high when we're young and plummeting as we age, is that it affects over 4,000 genes in the human body. 4,000 genes. Like, that is mind-blowing. And what it does is it resets those genes to a more youthful setting. I don't know about you, but sign me up, right? Like, I mean, this is when we talk about the fountain of youth, when we talk about how do we slow down aging or maybe reverse aging or repair the signs of aging. If we can turn these internal mechanisms that are innate mechanisms for healing and repair back on from being turned off because we've aged and whatever reason they get turned off for, like how amazing would it be to be able to do that at will? And so it's a really, I think it's incredibly intriguing. It's got years of research behind it. It was discovered in 1973 by a doctor in the States by the name of Dr. Lauren Pickart in 1973. And he's devoted his entire career to studying it. But if you are one of these people, if you're a research person and you love to dig into the research, if you go to a search engine like PubMed, for example, and you type in GHK copper and any question that you have around regeneration or healing or wound healing or whatever the case may be, the number of clinical trials and studies and papers that are being written about this thing every single day will blow your mind. So I'm just going to go through some of the key points and why we want to keep an eye on this peptide and different ways to get our hands on it. Now, I will say now that the FDA regulations that are being brought into effect as of actually the day that this podcast drops, which is July 5th, 2024, makes it that GHK copper as an injectable peptide will no longer be available through compounding pharmacies. I don't think it's going to be, the only way really for people to get their hands on it will be through research labs. And that's a whole different topic for another day, but definitely it is included in this kind of big sweep that the FDA did of peptides back in November, and that they're bringing to bear on July 5th. So today, Friday, July 5th. The good news about GHK copper is because it's so tiny, because it's only 3 amino acids plus the copper, right? So it's GHK, so glycine, histidine, lysine, 3 amino acids plus copper as a cofactor. Um, it is actually bioavailable topically, so it can be applied to the skin. And it also, now this is less researched, but there's definitely mention in the literature that many people believe that it is also a bioavailable orally, so it can be ingested. And this kind of makes sense, because if you look at the world of bioregulator peptides, which are peptides that are only 2 to 4 amino acids long, they are bioavailable orally. You can take those orally and get benefit from them, or you can apply them under the tongue and absorb them straight into the bloodstream, and you will get effect from them. So GHK being that size and that ilk, that ability to get to the DNA to affect genetic expression, so that implies that it's getting through the cell membrane, through the nucleus, into the nucleus of the cell and binding to DNA to affect that genetic expression. That would tell us that it's going to behave, there's a really good chance it's going to behave like all these other bioregulators. So currently on the market, we have cosmetic products that use GHK copper. My most favorite line that really centers the entire line around it is Vitali. And I've talked about them before. We've done a couple of podcasts together. You can find links and stuff on the Nat Recommends page. And I'll talk a little bit about how I use their products, but even companies like Young Goose, which is an incredible skincare line that is always looking for the next best thing and how do we help skin to age better or reverse skin aging. They even have GHK copper in a couple of their formulas as well. So it's definitely showing up. It's definitely can be used topically. And like I said, there's also some evidence that's saying that we can use it orally. So we have companies like Level Up Health that has GHK copper capsules. And there's a company that I won't name right now because they haven't actually announced it yet, but there is a liposomal GHK copper coming down the pipes in the next couple of months. And so follow me, stick with me on Instagram, because I will be crowing it from the rooftops the minute it's available. All right, let's stop talking about the product and let's actually talk about what this stuff can possibly do. So I said it was naturally occurring. Secondly, it has been shown to be incredibly powerful for wound healing. So it upregulates the production of collagen. It upregulates the production of GAGs, which is glycosaminoglycans. So these are water-binding molecules that are very important for skin, joint, and even metabolic health. So there's GAGs all over the body. So it helps to upregulate the production of these molecules. It also stimulates angiogenesis. So angiogenesis is the formation of new blood vessels to bring blood flow to areas that need it. And especially when you're dealing with wound healing, you're going to want to provide enough blood flow so that the body can heal. And it also helps with the removal of damaged tissue. So how interesting is that, right? So this little tiny compound that brings to the table both healing as well as removal, right? Easy, probably by activating certain components in the body that are responsible for grabbing and removing and breaking down damaged tissue, which is ultimately going to help with healing. So I've often told this story. If you're new to the podcast, you may not have heard this. I had a cyst removed from my chest a number of years ago, and I had been told by every single plastic surgeon who looked at this to say, you may want to just live with that cyst because you're going to end up with this hell of a scar because that area is going to scar really badly. And I will tell you that today I would challenge anyone to really find that. I mean, I guess if you looked at it super closely, you might find a scar, but nobody would ever come up to me and say, oh, you have a scar over there. Because what I used, and I used a number of things, but one of the key things that I used was GHK copper. And at the time, I was able to use it by injection, and I also used it topically. And so I would drop it on that wound every single day, helping it to heal. One of the things that GHK also does is it helps with realigning proper realignment of fibers. And so what that means is it helps with scarring. It helps to reduce scarring because it helps with proper organization of those skin fibers to help with proper healing. So it's not just that it's going to knit the wound together, it's actually going to help it to knit together in a better, more aesthetically pleasing way, if you will. In terms of skin benefits, in terms of those of us who are in that world where we're a little bit worried about skin tightening, this, that, and the other thing, it helps with skin tightening. It helps with skin density. So as we age, as women, we're losing estrogen. We're losing our skin is becoming thinner and more fragile. And also with firmness. So helping to reduce that kind of sagging appearance of the skin, and can also help with reducing the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles. So again, we want to, as much as possible, we want to maintain this smooth skin. And it does all that by upregulating the production of both collagen and elastin. And both of those, obviously, we all know, are integral elements to keeping our skin looking better. Hair growth. This is a big one, right? So what happens when people sometimes they have hair thinning or they start to lose their hair? Now, I'm not talking about male pattern baldness here. That's a completely different mechanism, although it might be part of the piece of the puzzle, if you will, down the road. But male pattern baldness is just androgenic hair loss is a very complex issue, and it's much more than just one thing. But one of the things that GHK copper can do for people who are just having hair thinning or hair loss because of age, they see this both in men and women, is it can actually help to increase the size of the hair follicles. So hair follicle micronization. So when the follicles shrink and kind of eventually die, that's a big issue with hair loss. So what ends up happening is you get bigger hair follicles, you might have thicker hair strands, and it also extends the anagen phase. So this is the growth phase of the hair. So there's clinical studies that have shown that actually these benefits are both great for men and women. I would say that the people who've used GHK copper with the best success for hair have used it with microneedling at the same time. So either you have a stamp or microneedle, you go to that place where you've had your thinning and you do your microneedling and you apply the GHK copper there. And another great thing to do on top of that would be to add your red or near infrared light. And that goes for the skin as well, actually. Definitely, I would say that when I've seen the best benefits from my copper peptides, I really started to see better benefits when I started microneedling with it. And I use this little stamp where I'll stamp and apply, which will apply the GHK copper and break through the skin and get it under the surface. So it's not quite sub-Q, but it's definitely getting it past that skin barrier. Okay, what else? GHK copper also has very powerful antioxidant properties. It is a potent antioxidant, and it scavenges free radicals. So it's going to reduce oxidative damage to the skin. And this is going to be really important for those of us who live in big cities where we're really exposed to environmental stressors and pollutants, which in and of themselves can damage the skin. It has very powerful anti-inflammatory benefits. So again, when we're trying to heal wounds, we have that initial inflammation, which is very important. We need inflammation at the beginning, but it's also now going to bring that inflammation under control. So it's going to modulate the activity of inflammatory cytokines to help to manage that inflammation so that the healing can now start to take place. And it'll do that also by reducing swelling and pain in the healing process. And again, it was a very small incision, so I can't talk so much about the pain benefits when I was healing that scar, but that surgical incision, but definitely it made, I healed super fast. All right, cell signaling, it influences the expression of genes affecting growth, repair, and inflammation. So a lot of what it's doing, everything of what it's doing by affecting gene expression. And so anything we can do to, this is as far upstream as we can get, you guys, right? Think about this. If we're not forcing anything, all we're doing is we're restoring our body's ability to do what it does best on its own. So it's just, I think, it's hard to imagine that. I just think that with GHK copper, there's so many possibilities around this peptide about how it can be harnessed, how can we reintroduce it into the body, how can we restore our levels like when we were youthful. In many ways, I feel like it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. I feel that just being able to figure out ways to restore those levels in our body is going to bring back a lot of the benefits that we're looking for when we're looking to, certainly from an aesthetic perspective, but even from a wound healing perspective. But, it actually does more than just make you pretty. Here's another really interesting thing about GHK copper. It actually plays a role in nerve regeneration. There are clinical studies that are going on right now studying its ability to be helpful for nerve injuries, for spinal cord injuries, and even for neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. I even saw a study not too long ago saying that it may have anxiolytic properties. So for people that are very anxious. So I wouldn't say that it would be a first line of defense for anxiety, but imagine if you have this compound that can help to regenerate nerve cells that have been damaged. Like that's kind of mind blowing, right? But wait, that's not all. There's even some research in the cancer space where for certain types of tumors, GHK seems to be able to flip on those genes to initiate apoptosis. Basically, by modulating a gene expression, it promotes programmed cell death in cancer cells. So cancer cells, we know they don't die. They just keep replicating. And this GHK copper peptide might actually be part of our own innate mechanism of fighting cancer before it really gets hold in our bodies. So definitely there's a lot of study going on in the cancer space around GHK copper, including using it in conjunction with conventional treatments at the same time. And that's another really interesting thing about the bioregulators, right? Very often they are used in the literature in conjunction with conventional treatments. So yet another reason why it might just be, might just have a place in this whole bioregulator space. So the other thing is, remember, we're calling it GHK-Cu. So it binds to copper because it needs copper to be activated. And again, I saw another study that said that in neurodegenerative diseases, one of the ways it might actually be helpful is because it can get to the brain and it can deliver non-toxic copper into neurons, which helps them to function better, which helps to save them. So delivery of copper, and we know that copper is also very important for healing. And so this GHK copper complex, if you will, it's almost like it's increasing the bioavailability of copper to cells where it's needed and to tissues where we're experiencing repair and growth. Okay, now I'm almost done here. This is going to be probably the shortest one. I could go the longest on GHK copper, but I just wanted to keep this short. I want this to be a bite-sized episode. And if you guys want more detail, if you want me to go even deeper, then just let me know and I'll do a deep dive on GHK copper. But the other part of GHK copper I wanted to talk about today, because it's summertime, is sun damage, right? So this is a compound that has been studied for and has been shown to help to mitigate and in some cases reverse sun damage. Now, before you come in here and you say to me, look, I have age spots on my hand. I've been using GHK copper for, I'm 60 years old. I have all these age spots. I've been using GHK copper for 3 months, still have the age spots. I don't have age spots on my hand. I have them on my arm. That's damage from when I was a kid, when I was a lifeguard. Anyway, I digress. You're going to have to get it. Like if the damage is really, really bad, you may have to do something like a laser, some kind of a treatment to get rid of the really bad hyperpigmentation, and then use the copper peptide to manage it, to prevent it from coming back. But there's definitely a lot of research that shows that it helps to regulate pigmentation. So by influencing melanocyte activity. So melanocytes are the cells that produce melanin, which is the pigment in your skin. So it has been shown to be helpful with sun damage and hyperpigmentation. It also, remember we said earlier, it upregulates the production of elastin. Well, elastin gets damaged by the sun. That's part of the sun damage that we experience when we expose ourselves to the sun, and that is that the skin just, it gets destroyed. And so by upregulating elastin, it may kind of balance out some of that sun damage. Because it's anti-inflammatory, it can help to recover from sunburns faster as well. So faster recovery from that overexposure when it happens. And it even repairs damage caused by UV radiation. So there's a possibility that because it has a reparative impact on that DNA, and we know that UV radiation damages our DNA. So I know that Debbie Barber from Vitali, she thinks of GHK copper not as a sunscreen, but she thinks of it as something that she puts on that helps to mitigate some of the damage that her skin is naturally going to sustain just from being outside. And of course, you could and should wear a good sunscreen. And sunscreen's a very thorny subject. I mean, sun exposure in general these days is a very thorny subject. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of people in the biohacking space who are dead set against sunscreen. They talk about building a sun callus. They talk about just being out in the sun and getting the benefits of the sun. And I don't disagree that we get a lot of benefit from the sun. But I will say that it depends on your goals, because there's definitely, we know that the UV radiation from the sun is going to damage the DNA in our skin. And we also know that if we don't plan on finishing our ends of days looking like a raisin, we're going to have to care for the skin. So in my mind, we want to find that middle ground. We want to get some sun in measured doses, but then the rest of the time we do want to protect ourselves from overexposure to the sun, because it's going to take a chunk out of our how we look. And frankly, eventually it could definitely do damage in other ways systemically to the body. And yes, I know we make vitamin D3 from the sun. I get all that. I accept it. I embrace it. I love the sun. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, you can tell, like, I've got a bit of a tan right now. But I do believe that we do have to be really cautious. And for me, I think of GHK copper as my secret weapon to help to mitigate some of that damage, because I don't hide from the sun. I never have. I probably never will. And there will be people who have way better skin than I do at my age. And then there's others who have way worse skin than I do. So I do feel that GHK copper is a very powerful ally in helping us to both reduce and possibly mitigate that damage from the sun. But you have to get it in there. So I've started experimenting in the last couple of months. I've been taking GHK-Cu as a capsule. So I've been using it orally. And I've been using my GHK-Cu serum. I've been once a week or every 2 weeks, I will microneedle with my GHK copper serum, and I exfoliate every morning and then do the GHK copper on top. Now, pro tip with GHK copper is this peptide is that you do not want to apply it right after vitamin C. You want to take those two away from each other because they kind of cancel each other out, which is not a very technical way of saying it, but bottom line, it's not that it's going to hurt you, is that you're not going to get the benefits of both those compounds, which are both very, very important. So I would say that if you're using a vitamin C serum and you're using a GHK copper serum, I would use them well apart from each other, probably 20 minutes or so, or use one in the morning and one in the evening. That's another really nice way to do it. So that's my kind of dive on GHK-Cu. I think I shared with you the products that I'm using. If you're interested, I mean, you know where to find them. It's natnidham.com. Go to Nat Recommends. You'll find everything there. This isn't a sponsored episode or anything. I just think that this peptide is so fascinating, and it's so important for us to keep our eye on the research here, because there's so many benefits to it. And it's just like a very natural way for our bodies to manage the damage that we are subjected to just from normal aging, just from modern day life, and of course from the sun. So thank you so much for being here, you guys. I appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed this short little GHK Copper solo episode. And let me know if you want more on this peptide, or if there's another topic that you're dying for me to dive into, and I will be happy to do that. All right, until we meet again, bye.